sisters keeper show. Oh yeah, oh yeah. This is my story, my testimony. C'est mon histoire, mon témoignage. We give God the glory, let the whole world know. My sister's keeper, yeah.
Hello, sisters, and welcome back to my Sister's Keeper podcast. My name is Sheila. I am your host, and this is my story, ma testimony, c'est mon histoire, mon témoignage. Today, I have a wonderful, wonderful woman of God who is with us, who's going to share her story, and she's also a life coach, but I'm not going to introduce her. She's going to introduce herself. So, Miss Louise, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheila. I appreciate it. So my name's Louise Wright, and I am actually a life coach, and my specialty is in grief and loss. The reason why I came into that work, that ministry, is because 10 years ago, we lost our daughter in a horrendous car accident. She was coming home on the highway, and we still to this day do not know exactly what happened, but she somehow lost control of her car. We believe somebody cut her off, but we don't know for sure. And she ended up losing total control of the car, and she went through the medium and she hit a semi-truck head on. And the semi-truck was going 65, 70 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
The car was totally destroyed. Somehow, the people who stopped were able to pull her out of the vehicle, and they did CPR on her, and they kept doing it until paramedics arrived, and then they were able to rush her to the hospital. She survived for 5 weeks. That story alone could take me hours to tell, but I'll be pretty brief on it. But let me back up. Most of my life, I have found I'm a pretty quiet person, especially in any kind of group setting.
Okay.
One-on-one, I can be a little more talkative. But in a group, I tend to be very quiet, and everybody just talks around me, and I'm a really good listener. So I found people started talking to me, even in grocery stores. I mean, if we're waiting in a line, it's a long line or it's the holidays, whatever. And, I might just casually say something to the person in front of me if they have a child or something, and I'll talk to the little one. And then we just get talking. And before I know it, that person is telling me their whole life story.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, I just listen and say, okay, wow, maybe I'll make a couple comments and, different things or a suggestion. And then when it's our turn and they go on and then I go on, and they always say, thank you so much for listening. And I had one mom, and it turned out I was in one city, she lived in the very next city. Or had lived. And so I ended up hearing her whole life story. And she said to me afterwards, she goes, why did I just tell you my whole story? She goes, I am so sorry. I've never done that before. And I said, that's because you were supposed to tell me.
Yes.
You were needed to get it out.
Mm.
And so we talked a few more minutes and so forth. So then I thought, you know what? God's got a plan here. He's bringing these people, these women to me for a reason. And I think it's time I get coaching or counseling. And just like a few weeks later, I actually got in the mail a scholarship from Light University offering me this scholarship to start their coaching practice.
Oh, wow.
Schooling. And I thought, this is just, okay, God.
Wow.
All right. So,
Did you apply for it?
No.
Oh, wow.
Well, I used to be a center director at a pregnancy center, and I counseled the women coming in wanting abortions. And of course, we did not do abortions there because it was a Christian-based center.
Okay.
So then it was up to me to counsel them. So we would give them the pregnancy test. If it was positive, we always encouraged to go get an ultrasound. And so I would go with them to the nurse, and she would do the ultrasound. And while they're doing it, I always pointed out, wow, look at this heart beating. You're only 7 weeks gestation, and look at that heart beating a mile a minute. And then it would be like, oh, look, they're kicking you, and you can't even feel it right now, can you? They're like, no. And it's like, yeah, they're kicking. They're pretty active, this little one, and so forth. And all of that just helps so much for them to realize this is a real life. It's not just tissue.
Mm.
And so I was able to save a lot of lives. And I had one mom come in, and it turned out she was expecting twins. She had no idea. And we
Wow.
found the two babies, and we go, yes, you're pregnant. And yes, the baby's there. But actually, you're having two babies, not one, but two. And we showed them
Wow.
babies. And she was like, I could maybe abort one, but there's no way I can abort two. And many
you-
months later, she came in for the pregnancy class and childbirth class. I'm sorry, that's the word. Childbirth class.
Yeah.
And I taught that also. And it was so nice to see her back again, and that she really did stick with the pregnancy, and
Yeah.
she was so looking forward to her babies being born. And she even she was back with her boyfriend, and he was there, came with her and supported her. And it was like, I have a gift. All right, I have to do this.
Yeah.
So because I had taken some classes from them, from Light University, for the pregnancy center, they already had my name. But it was like 4 or 5 years later that they sent me this letter. So I
Wow.
applied, and sure enough, they offered me the full scholarship, and it
Wow.
hardly cost me a penny. And I ended up getting really into it and started taking more classes and more classes, and classes more specifically on grief and different kinds of losses and so forth. And I ended up with my master's certification in Christian
Oh,
coaching.
wow.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, so that's my job now. But it all started back with my daughter.
Mm.
And in those 5 weeks, God did amazing things. I mean, at the end, we lost our daughter, and who we miss greatly.
Yeah, but
She was 31. She was engaged to be married. I had even had the chance to take her to the bridal shower. I mean, to the bridal shop,
Russia.
and I saw her trying on dresses and
Wow.
picked one out. And we even went cake shopping and all that kind of stuff. So at least I walked through that with her.
Yeah.
And she did not become very conscious very often. There were only a few times she actually kind of came to enough. And we had to give her like paper and pen to write because they had a tube in her throat and so forth. But in those 5 weeks, I felt like God kept her in a semi-coma so she wouldn't feel her pain. But he used my husband and I. And we got to know all of the nurses. I mean, they would take their breaks in her room. And they would sit on the edge of her bed, and they would just talk to us. And I mean, after about 3 weeks, we knew them all. We knew their life
Wow.
stories. We knew all about them. We even had a maintenance man come in one day. He knocked on the door and he said, I am so sorry to interrupt you or bother you. He said, but could I just talk to you for a minute? And we said,
Wow.
sure. And he goes, I just need to say, you are the most caring parents I have ever seen. He said, you never leave this room. And he goes, I have parents come in and they're there for a couple of minutes and then they tell their kid goodbye and off they go. But you stay here. You're here all day long. And he goes, I am so impressed. I've never seen parents like you. And he goes, so I just wanted to tell you, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And then we're like, okay. Aren't all parents like this? They're trained.
You would think.
Yeah, fighting for her life. And
Wow.
she had brain bleeds. She had bones broken all over her body. She had to have a couple of surgeries. And, her eye socket was crushed. It was, she may have lost her sight if she had lived in that one eye. But yeah, he was just so impressed with us, and it just surprised us. So it was like God just kept bringing people to us to talk to us. And even one day, the head doctor in the ICU, he came in because he thought we had signed a DNR. and that we wanted him to stop absolutely everything. And he kept saying, I can bring her back. I know we can bring her back. And, and I said, wait. That's not what we did. We don't want you to stop everything. We're just saying if her heart stops, let her go. We have peace. We know where she's going. We know that's what she wants. Just let her go. And so then he was like, okay, I thought you were telling us to stop it all. And we're like, so, and then he stood and talked to us for like 10, 15 minutes and just, to know us and getting to know our daughter and so forth. And a little later, a nurse came in and I said, yeah, Dr. So-and-so came in and we had a really nice conversation. She just looked at me in shock. She goes, wait, what? Who came in? And I told her, and she goes, oh, he never goes into any room. He's always just out in the center talking to the doctors, directing them what to do. And I said, no, he came in and he talked to us for quite a while. They were shocked.
Wow.
So it was just, God just kept doing so many things. And later she was transferred over to the neurological ICU to help with her brain bleeds because she was also starting to have seizures. And she was having 4 to 5 seizures an hour. And they had her on multiple medications, anti-seizure meds, and they just weren't working. And so she was there about, I guess, a week and a half or so, 10 days maybe. And then one night the doctor came in and with a nurse. No, one day one day he called us into a small room and to have a talk with us. And he said, this is where we are. He said, I believe we can bring her back. We can wake her up from this coma. We can get her going. He said, but I can't guarantee she'll be the child you knew, the daughter you knew. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, she might have a mind more of like a 3 or 4-year-old. No. And she's probably going to need almost like 24-hour care. And we're like, okay. I said, I don't know about that. I said, we'll have to think about that. And he goes, well, like I said, we can still work with her and maybe we can make things a lot better. We just need to get these seizures stopped and, and we can see how she is. And I said, okay. And then I finally said to him, I just need to say something to you. I said, please understand, I don't want my daughter to die. I said, I don't want to lose my daughter. I said, but if she passes, I said, we have total peace. We know where our daughter's going. And he's just looking at me. And I said, we know that our daughter will be in heaven with the Lord Jesus Christ and Father and the Holy Spirit. And she will live for all eternity with no pain whatsoever, a whole brand new body. And I said, so if my daughter dies, we're going to be heartbroken, but we're also going to have a peace about it. And because we know we're going to see her again one day. And he just nodded his head and he goes, oh, okay, all right. And then he went on talking. So, we finished it all up and so forth. My husband and I got up to leave and we're headed to the door and my husband opened up the door and he goes, excuse me. And we turned around and he said, can I ask what you believe? And I looked at my husband looked at me and I'm looking at him and he's nodding at me and was like, so
here we go.
We turn around, we go back, we sit down, and I said, okay. And I gave him the whole plan of salvation. I told him we believe the Bible is the true word of God. And that, yes, there are other authors that wrote it, but God gave them the words to say. And I said, I gave him the whole plan of salvation. I said, we believe God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to this earth. He was born of a Virgin Mary. He lived. He gave the testimony over and over. He told people who he was. He did miracles. He healed people. I said, he could even heal my daughter. I know that. And I said, or he could heal her in heaven. And so I just told him the whole thing. And I says, that's why we have peace. And he goes, okay. And he's nodding again. He goes, all right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with me. I said, you're welcome. And then we got up and we went. So to this day, I have no idea if he ever accepted the Lord, if he's ever thought about it. I don't know. But
But at least you planted a seed.
yes, we planted the seed.
Yes.
And that had to be God.
Yes.
That had to be the Holy Spirit in that room, and he planted into that man's head to ask that question. What do you believe?
Yeah.
And then God gave me the words to give the testimony. So, and then there was several days later when he walked in the room one evening, just as we were getting ready to leave with the nurse. And at that point, that's when he said, I think we can bring her back. I still think that, however, she will not be the child you know. And that's when he told us that part.
Okay.
And so we gathered that without him saying it, he was saying, you need to make a choice. You need to make a decision. So we just said, okay, we have some talking to do. And he goes, yeah, you do. And he goes, just take your time and think about things. We're like, okay. So he turns and he walks out of the room. Well, then the nurse stays. And she, and I'm looking at my husband and I'm just heartbroken at this point. But the nurse is still standing there. And then she says, can I talk to you for a minute? I never met this nurse before. She had never been in our room. She'd never been my daughter's nurse.
Wow. So at this point, you should have just made an office there and take appointments because wow.
Yes. So I turned and looked at her. I said, okay, yes, sure, go ahead. And she goes, well, I have a decision to make too. And she said, no one here knows, but she goes, I am 4 months pregnant. And she said, the doctors just found something wrong with the baby and they want me to abort the baby. And I'm just looking at her. And it's like, okay, come on, God. I counseled women wanting abortions.
Yeah.
And he leads this girl who has no idea who I am into my room. So I'm in my head praying, give me the words, God, give me the words. And I said, okay. And I said, what are you thinking? She goes, I just don't know. She goes, because if the baby is born, the baby it's going to be really ill, really sick. And I said, okay. I said, if you have your baby, I said, think of it this way. You get to hold your baby. You get to hug that baby close to your heart. You get to kiss your baby, talk to your baby. Let your child know how much you love him or her, how special they are to you. I said, and even if they should pass away, I said, you at least know you got to hold your little one close to you and snuggle them close to your beating heart. And I said, that would bring that child such comfort. And she said, oh, well, the baby probably won't die, but the baby would probably have to be put in some type of a home for most of their life. I said, okay, then you can go visit your baby. You can visit weekly. You don't have to necessarily go every day, but you can even visit weekly. And again, you can love on your child. You can give that little one hugs and let them know they're loved and they were so wanted. And I said, and then if you have more children, then they get to meet their sibling and so forth. I said, however, if you choose abortion, you are a registered nurse. You know this. You know you are going to be stopping your child's beating heart. And at this stage of your pregnancy, your child is already kicking and moving and squirming, and you probably can even start feeling this little one a little bit right now. And they're swallowing their own fluids. And they're urinating even, and they can even start hearing you. And so they know your voice. I said, so you need to think on all this, and you need to remember, Only you can make this choice. It's not up to the doctors. It's not up to your spouse or partner. It's not up to friends or parents, whatever, other nurses. It's you, because you are the one that will have to live with it. When they projected birth date is every year, that date's going to hit you.
Yeah.
When the date, if you choose abortion, the date of that abortion, every year, when you hear that date, even 50 years from now, it's going to hit in your consciousness. I said, so only you can make that choice, and it's up to you. And I said to her at that point, I said, can I pray for you? Would you allow me to pray over you? And she said, yes, please. And so I said, can I hug you? And she said, yes. And so I hugged her and drew her close to me. And I just prayed. And I prayed God's blessings over her, God's protection, God's perfect healing on this baby, even that God could do miraculous things in the womb, that the baby would be born nowhere near as bad off as they think, or even totally healed.
Yeah.
And, and I just said that she would make the right choice. And then I said, I'm going to continue praying for you. And so I have now shared, I don't know what she chose. Truly, I don't.
Oh, you didn't see her afterwards?
No, nope, never saw her again. So I have no idea. But I really feel like she chose life. I just feel it in my heart, and I feel like it was a little boy that she was carrying. And so and I've told that story over and over. And it's like every time I tell it, I keep thinking, what did she do? Am I going to see this baby again one day?
Wow. It will be nice. I pray that you do.
I do too. Thank you. So God just did amazing things in those 5 weeks. I mean, and it took me 2 years to figure that out, because that night we had to go home and we had a decision we had to make. And I just wasn't ready to talk about it yet. So when we got to the apartment we were renting, the studio apartment, I went into one room, my husband went to another, and he just turned on the TV and sat down. And I actually went into the bedroom and I threw myself on the bed and I just started yelling into the pillow. I just smothered my face in a pillow. And I just was so mad at God. Why was God making me make the choice to end my daughter's life? How could any parent make that choice? 5 weeks. He could have taken her any time in those 5 weeks, but he was making me, my husband, to make the choice. And I just cried. So after quite a while, I finally sat up. And I picked up my phone and I called my best friend. We were in Salt Lake City, Utah at the time. And I called my friend down in Colorado. And she could tell right away something was wrong. She goes, what's the matter? And I told her that we were being not forced, but basically told we had to make a choice. Do we stop everything and let her go? Or do we keep fighting to get her to live? And the interesting thing is, a little backstory real quick. 1 month, now my daughter was only 31, but 1 month before the accident, she went to bank and had a person, I'm sorry, I can't think of the name, who can sign paperwork.
Power of attorney?
Yes, she filled out a whole power of attorney form, and she had it witnessed and so forth and stamped. And she made copies of it. And she came to us one night after dinner and she said, I need to talk with you guys. And we said, okay. And she sat down with us and she said, I wrote out a whole plan of if anything were to ever happen to me, what I want done and how I want it handled. And she went over it. And we just sat there in shock, like, we haven't even done that yet. And yet here my 31-year-old daughter had the mindset to do that and then have it witnessed. So she gave each of us a copy and she said, I'm keeping a copy in my purse and a copy in my car, just in case anything were to ever happen. So we knew what she wanted. And when I thought they could save her and she'd be okay, we thought that would be all right, acceptable. But she was at a point And if she only had a mindset of a 3-4-year-old and would need constant help, that's not what she wanted. So that's what my friend finally reminded me. Louise, she wanted you to know what she wanted, and this is not what she wanted. She's ready to go, but God's waiting for you to be ready to let her go. So I said, okay, thank you. And we ended the conversation. So I laid there a little longer, continuing to cry, praying, saying, okay, God, I forgive you for making me make this choice. And would you please forgive me for screaming and yelling at you and being angry with you? And I really did. I have to say, I felt a peace come over me. So I finally got up, washed my face, went into the other room and looked at my husband. He took one look at me and he stood up and he goes, okay, what? I said, okay. I said, it's time. And he just started nodding and I said, yeah, it's time. And he goes, okay, all right. And I said, and he goes, let's go. I said, go where? What do you mean, let's go? He goes, back to the hospital. I said, well, no. I said, it's evening time. They were probably even on shift change and so forth. I said, we'll go in the morning. He goes, no, we made our choice. We made the decision. Let's go. And I'm just like, okay, all right, okay, all right. So we went back to the hospital. And of course, yes, they were in the middle of shift change. But long story short, we told them we were finished. And we wanted them to stop everything. And they said, okay, let us finish with this shift change, fill in the new people, what's going on, and we'll take care of it all. We said, okay. So it took about 2 hours almost, and they finally came in and they just stopped everything. They kept one IV in so that they could continue to give her pain medicine so she would not feel any pain. And then the next day they moved her up to another room, palliative care. And so then they had nurses come in and checking on her. And they told us we were welcome to stay there. They brought a cot in. They set up another bed for both of us. They said, you're welcome to stay all night, or you can come and go. We're happy to bring you food if you need it, drinks if you need it, whatever you need, just let us know. We're here for you. We said, okay. So then a couple of people came up to say their goodbyes and so forth. And her fiance came up with his mom, and they both took time to just sit with her. And he just kept staring at her. It was so sweet and just kind of made us cry, and then told her goodbye, and he left. And the next morning, now I didn't include this real quick, my daughter had 2 service dogs with her. She was a service dog trainer, and she had her own service dogs, and they were in the accident. And one did not survive the accident. The other was badly injured, but did survive.
Okay.
So a friend my daughter, Rebecca, was taking care of her. And so we had called and asked, would she mind bringing the dog up, Kenzie, up to say goodbye? And she goes, not at all. I'll be there. It took 2 hours from where we lived in Wyoming to come to Utah. And so she drove all the way up to Utah, and she brought the dog in. And oh my gosh, Kenzie was so happy to see Steve and I, and she was all over us, and she was a golden retriever, so she was just loving on us. And finally, I went to the bed, and I kind of patted the bed. She walked over, and she was sniffing it and so forth. And finally, she then jumped up on top of the bed, and she was like almost straddling with her 4 legs our daughter.
Je viens témoigner, je viens parler de la bonté de mon Dieu. C'est mon témoignage, it's my story, my testimony. Oh yeah. Come and hear what the Lord has done. He has changed your life. He has transformed the story. A testimony, testimony all around me. Ooh. Je viens témoigner, je viens parler de la bonté de mon Dieu. mon témoignage, it's my story, my testimony, my testimony. Oh yeah, testimony, oh yeah, testimony, oh. This is my story, my testimony, oh yeah, mon témoignage, yeah, testimony, oh. This is mon histoire.